Thanks, Allison. You didn't share the fun fact, so I'll share my little fun fact. Fun fact, I went to school here, graduated in 1999 for my MBA, and my daughter just graduated from the College of Engineering and the newest minted class. So we are a CMU family. It's great to be back on campus. And what a great turnout. So thanks for all of you being here instead of outside in this gorgeous weather. It means a lot that you're here. It tells me something. It tells me that you have an intention. Maybe you don't have it all framed out, but you have an intention to be here. You have an intention for entrepreneurship and you're thinking about something. So that's great. How many of you have a pretty clear intention on your entrepreneurship path? Arms straight up, arms midway, arms down, however you want to tell me. Seeing a lot of arms down, kind of lukewarm. I don't see online, so it's hard to see there, but oh, we do have a raised hand. Okay, that's good. You're thinking, you're contemplating, you're in the right place. This is Ramit Sethi. He started his business in his dorm when he was in college. It was a personal financial blog. Took him 10 years to get to 5 million in revenue in 1 week. It was an overnight success over a 10-year period. He has growthlab.com, which you can check out, and his business has been thriving. The path is long for some of us, but it's well worth it if we have that intention. So today we're going to talk about a domino strategy. Why is that important? We're going to talk about the different types of entrepreneurship, and we're going to talk about founder market fit. And of course, we'll have some time for Q&A. So be sure to take some notes as we go along. Why am I here? Why am I the one standing up in front of you talking about the different types of entrepreneurship? So let me tell you a little bit more about me. I'm an adjunct professor because I appreciate learning and I'm a continuous learner. But what are we learning about as entrepreneurs? We're learning about ourselves as much as we're learning about our business. And building a business isn't easy. Now I'm on the other side of entrepreneurship, which is exit planning. So when you hear about a startup that was built to sell and they have an exit, that's exciting, right? There was an intention from the beginning to build that company so it was transferable and sellable. Well, what about mature businesses? What about family businesses? What about businesses that don't have a clear succession path? So that's my focus of entrepreneurship today. But I have a path in my experience of working from startups to corporate global companies, as you mentioned, as was mentioned in my bio. Company I worked for went through an M&A transaction. I also have a podcast. So if any of you want more Laurie Barkman outside the classroom, you can check out Succession Stories. And I'm also an author of a book called The Business Transition Handbook. So that's a little bit about me. So let's dive in. Again, why are we here? Why are we talking about this? The path to successful entrepreneurship is how you define it. And that path can be a winding road, not necessarily a straight line. 20% of new businesses fail within the first 2 years. Ouch. We're working so hard. Why aren't we making it? It's difficult. That's why. This is not easy. If only it was this easy, right? Just draw that line and go from start to finish. One of the things that we're going to talk about today is the power of sequencing. It's this domino idea. What happens if we just get to that first domino and then things kind of go from there? We don't necessarily have to have everything mapped out in front of us, but we got to put one step in front of the other. This is Paul Graham. He's the founder of Y Combinator, which is one of the most successful accelerators in the world, dare I say. And what he says is the way to do really big things is to start really small. And you want to make that universal website. He's talking about Facebook here. You want to make that universal website, start by building a site for Harvard undergrads to stalk one another. It's kind of funny. So that's the concept. How do we start small? How do we have that intention? How do we get our first sale? How do we get that sense of, hey, we have a problem to solve? What is it that we can define? And then how do we think about that sequencing so we can knock down one domino and go to the next? This is Vern Harnish. Vern was a successful entrepreneur excuse me, successful entrepreneur and founded EO, the Entrepreneurs Organization, which is a group you might have heard about. It's a group for CEOs, advisor group for one another. And what he says is your job is to find that front domino, that one thing you can accomplish gets you down that path to knock down the other dominoes. And together it'll be very, very powerful. All right, so we have an intention. We're thinking about entrepreneurship. What are the different kinds of entrepreneurship? Now, there might be more than 8, and you'll raise your hand. You'll say, Laurie, what about this? And that's okay. This isn't to say you're going to fit into all these. And sometimes they overlap. So you might see that for yourself as well. These are the 8 that we'll talk through at a high level: small business, large company, scalable startup, social enterprise, innovator, hustler, imitator, and acquirer. So let's start with small business. This is by far the #1 category in the United States. Most businesses, dare I say about 90%, fall under this definition. Well, why is that? Well, you can define a small business by revenue in the lower middle market and the very, very lower middle market. Let's say it's under 20 million. So a lot of companies fall into that category. But one of the things that is special about this category, not only because they're really fueling the US economy, right, with job creation, most jobs created are in this lower middle market. But I think what's also special about it is family businesses fall under this too. Is there anybody in the room that has a family business they're part of? Yeah, we got 1 person, 2 people. For some of you, you might be thinking about after school joining that company full time. And that baton handoff is really important to keep things moving with those businesses. The other thing about small business entrepreneurs, some of them create a business that is a lifestyle for them. Someone once asked me the question, well, Laurie, if you weren't going to retire ever, what would that impact? How would that impact your business? And if you think about that, it's never retiring, which I don't advocate for, by the way. But what kind of business would you create if you were going to work in it at a very long time? You know, how might you structure things? So for some people, that legacy is really important. And for others, it's about taking on some risk, but making sure that they are able to be happy in what they're doing. So a lot of times small businesses are hiring more locally. You know, they're not necessarily national. Their footprint is more local. They want to be their own boss. They want to make a profit that can satisfy the lifestyle for their family. They are taking on a degree of personal risk, a lot of times through loans from banks. And you might find the everyday entrepreneur here, right? Whether it's retail or service trades. For me, as an M&A advisor working in the lower middle market, this is by far the biggest category of clients that I work with. So there's a lot of them out there. The second one is large company. Well, gee, Laurie, why are we talking about entrepreneurship with a large company? Great question. And that goes back to the introduction from a few moments ago, the Corporate Startup Lab class. Keep that in mind if you think that this one suits you. Corporations are innovative too. Yes, they are. And some of them have startups. You may not be aware of that. I was part of one with American Eagle Outfitters many years ago. The e-commerce group at one point was a baby. And we were nurturing that baby to toddlerhood, teenagehood, and now, of course, it's a very, very mature business. AE.com is probably climbing towards $1 billion. What's really interesting, not only for public companies, but also private companies, think about the founder, right? The founder's putting out a level of risk, taking on a level of risk. The further away we get from that founder mentality about risk taking, we get more comfortable. So you can imagine big public companies not wanting to take a lot of risk, but then some of them say, wait a minute, we need to stay close. We need to understand what's happening and what are the dynamics there. And they put together focused teams that are working on innovation projects. Now, how they do that can vary. One example is Amazon Lab 126. Anyone heard of Amazon Lab 126? Amazon Lab 126 launched the Kindle, and they've launched other products too. This is their innovation group. Another example, two examples close to home. One is MSA Safety. Companies publicly traded, been around over 120 years at this point. I got to know them from the Corporate Startup Lab. They were one of our sponsors. And Gustavo and his team launched a corporate startup called Safety.io, which was using, to quote my friend Sean Amorati, the data exhaust. How do they monetize the data that is in their systems so their clients can benefit? Very interesting project. It's quite successful and has been growing. Mary Beth Green, also an alum, Chief Innovation Officer at Sheetz. Sheetz, as you might know, is the convenience and gas, and they have created an innovation group because they're thinking about, well, what happens if there are no gas pumps and other things too. So corporate entrepreneurs are, if you're like me, and I can describe myself, more risk averse. I wanted to be part of that corporate startup. I was part of startups too. I was not the founder, but I always liked that sense of innovation and creativity and doing something new and different and having some latitude, and doing it within a larger entity enables you to have a different risk profile. So you're rewarded with some professional, interesting things to work on and potential for growth within your career, but the monetizing is different, right? And you're not necessarily putting your house on and mortgaging your house to do this business. So now we come to the more risk-loving side. And I don't know if most of you fall into this bucket or not. And that's the scalable startup, because we are sitting in the Short Center after all, and many of you may be thinking about this. So Yammer was acquired by Microsoft for $1.2 billion, not too shabby. And the founder, David Sachs, said, find an edge, win a small victory or a foothold, assimilate new resources, level up, repeat. What is that about? That's about scalability. How do we create a scalable business? We're going to look for market trends. We're going to try to find problems to solve. Cool tech isn't enough, right? We have to solve problems. You're going to get funding sources, for example, from venture groups or angel advisors. The money is out there, or maybe you're bootstrapping it yourself. But there's a degree of risk and reward that's different when you are the founder of a tech startup that you're envisioning to scale. These are two founders, Tope Atuana. Anyone use Calendly? It's one of my favorite products. It's doing great. I think it's got like a $3 billion plus valuation at this point. Don Charlton, this was a local startup. I was the head of marketing for a period of time, and they were acquired by a PE firm. Jazz HR is a applicant system for small businesses, and that was a very scalable platform. So the motivations and incentives as an entrepreneur that's interested in this type of environment is really being motivated for that vision. You want to achieve that vision. You will probably do anything to achieve it. You're going to put more personal risk forward, and you're looking for that risk reward balance, right? If you put more risk in, you're looking for a higher reward back. Now, the next category is a social entrepreneur. This is a really, really interesting category. These are businesses for good. They're not nonprofits, but their mission is clear. They want to do good by the communities they serve. They want to solve social problems or affect social change. And they're combining this consciousness with business strategy. So two examples, one local, one you may have heard of, Blake Myskoki. He's the founder of Tom's. And they were one of the pioneers of this idea to, sell a shoe, donate a shoe. You'll see it now with buy a sock, donate a sock, and things like that with other companies. But Tom's really took off based on the social good that they were creating. And Leah Lizarrando, she's one of our entrepreneurs in residence. Perhaps you've met her. She's the co-founder of 412 Food Rescue, which was a technology platform to get volunteers to pick up food from hotels and restaurants that would otherwise go to waste and distribute them to communities that need it. I have volunteered for them. It's actually feels wonderful as a volunteer to do that. But there's a tech platform behind it, so it could scale. The motivations and incentives as a social entrepreneur, as you can imagine, are a little bit different. Making a difference is really at the core of it. And it's also about making a profit, but that mission is so strong and they care deeply about that. Okay, number 5 is innovator. Innovators abound around here. Carnegie Mellon, so many innovative ideas. Some famous faces here. Bill Gates from Microsoft and Steve Jobs from Apple, really transforming an industry. And Sarah Blakely, who, if some of my women friends here know the Spanx brand, she helped transform how women feel about themselves through products that she innovated. So some motivations and incentives for innovator entrepreneurs. They're looking to take ideas and turn them into business ventures because they're solving a problem. They're looking for ways to stand out from others. And they're taking the old and they're experimenting with it to create the new. The hustler. The hustler is a good thing. This is not a hustler in a bad way. So I don't want to give the wrong impression here. And there's only one person that I think, no, there's probably more of them, but I just love Gary Vee as the example for the hustler entrepreneur. Gary V. Vaynerchuk created VaynerMedia. I just see him everywhere. Gary is a hustler. He is a self-starter, determined to succeed. He's got an outgoing personality that just exudes people wanting to work with him and be around him and be part of his team. It's just confidence that's so strong. And he literally could probably sell anything to anyone. 7, the imitator. Again, not a bad thing when it comes to entrepreneurship. Why is that? We're not going to reinvent retail. For goodness sake, Sam Walton didn't invent retail. He invented a better way. And Barbara Corcoran from the Corcoran Group, she didn't invent real estate, right? But she invented a better way. And restaurants, we see this all the time. And Herman Cain, RIP, Godfather's Pizza, had taken this chain to a whole other level. So McDonald's, if you think about that, if you ever saw that movie, it's a great movie. The background of seeing an idea, seeing what's not working, and what can you do to take it to the next level and make it better. Find business models and industries that have the potential. Take a look and see what mistakes are being made. The McDonald's movie is, again, fantastic to see what was being observed by Ray Kroc. He saw mistakes being made and what could he do about it? What could he do differently? And he capitalized on that. And then he built a brand around it and he built up the market demand. Very focused, very determined. Okay, last but not least, number 8, here we are, the acquirer entrepreneur. From a risk profile standpoint, what's really interesting is that you can acquire a business, an existing business. Maybe it's a franchise, like Chris Sinkar, who's an adjunct professor here, a little commercial plug for his class, how to purchase a franchise and how to think about that. Len Carrick, another adjunct professor here, a plug for both of these gentlemen. Both of them have been on my show, by the way. And Len is a serial entrepreneur. He's a serial acquirer. I think that the George Howe Corporation might be his 4th or 5th business. And there's something really fun about it. He truly loves it. And he just added another coffee business. That's right. I saw that too. So Chris and Len are outstanding examples of how to think about acquiring a business. What's interesting for me now in the role that I have in mergers and acquisitions is people who want to buy a business have been calling me. Oh, Laurie, we know what companies do you have listed? And I talk with a lot of buyers about their thesis and what they're focused on. And so I would say, in contrast to when I was in your seat and sitting here in 1997, 8, and 9, it really wasn't a thing, especially in this building. So I think it's really important to acknowledge, and that's why we're here, that there are different ways to become an entrepreneur. You don't necessarily have to start from scratch. So hopefully you see that as a good thing, and maybe it's a fit for you, which is why we're having this conversation. So acquisition entrepreneurs are buying into something that's existing. Now, when I say proven businesses, that doesn't mean it couldn't be a turnaround. It might be. You know, some folks look for turnarounds because they want that financial benefit when they, can 10x or 100x that business. It's got some active nature to it. It's got some active cash flow. It's got free cash flow that you may be able to borrow. The bank likes to see that, right? So if you're seeking SBA lending, which is probably a whole other session topic, but if you're seeking commercial or SBA lending, free cash flow is going to be really important. So what can you do there? More moderate risk. Risk never goes to zero, but it's perhaps more moderate risk than if you started the business from scratch. Okay. So our next piece of this is founder market fit. How likely are you to build a thriving company or run a thriving company, if you want to intersperse that word? I want to talk about this because investors, if they're going to be investing in your business, they are investing in you. You've probably heard of that before, and it's true. Investors want to see founder market fit. They want to make sure that the founders are aligned with the market need. So, for example, they're going to want to understand, what personal experience do you have, bless you, solving this problem? How long have you been in the industry? Education counts too, by the way. Your education counts, your prior work experience counts, all of that counts. How well do you know the problems of this industry? And how badly do you want it? How badly do you want to change the status quo? Two great examples. Airbnb got started because the founders said, hey, we want to try this out. And they actually were testing it in their own space, in their own rental property or whatever it was. And Slack, they built a communications tool and used it themselves and wanted to see if this was solving a problem for them. Okay, so we're coming to the wind down here. What's the summary? What's the takeaway? What is your intention as you leave today? I want you to think about your entrepreneurial DNA. Be honest with yourself, because the best fit for you, if you weren't going to retire one day, what would you want to be doing? Who would you want to be doing it with? Think about this concept of founder market fit and the domino strategy. How can you start small? And how can you really learn about the pain points that you're trying to solve? Think Airbnb, think Slack. And knock down those dominoes in sequencing. And enjoy the journey. This is a journey. This is not easy. It's tough. It's highly rewarding. But as I talk to many entrepreneurs on my show, it's ups and downs. So we got to be in it for the long haul. And the famous quote from Jeff Bezos is that all overnight success takes about 10 years. So you got to be in it to win it. That's my final slide. Please connect with me on any of the platforms, and I'm going to open it up to questions. Yes.
So a lot of the plans that you outlined are kind of mentioned, like how you will get into those or make them more familiar with them. Yeah. What about the path of, the path of an entrepreneur or working at a larger company? How would you find yourself in one of those positions?
So the question is, let's say you're interested in being an intrapreneur, working in a corporate startup. How do you find yourself to get one of those positions? It's a really good question. And I think LinkedIn is a great place to start, as well as some Google searches. The first thing I would encourage you to do is become familiar with some job descriptions. Like, what are those titles that are circulating out there? When I was part of this corporate startup with American Eagle, we didn't talk about it that way necessarily. And I was hired as a digital marketing manager, online marketing manager. It wasn't necessarily something that you would search on and find. But today, I think the structure of innovation groups is a little more clear. So if you're interested in a certain industry, let's just take Amazon as an example, because we talked about it. So let's say you're interested in the tech industry, and you think you might be interested in a big public company as opposed to a private company. You have certain geographies you might be interested in. So that's one way to slice your search. And then you might start to look at, okay, which of these maybe innovation groups or, words that could potentially find what you're looking for. How can you start to get a sense of that? Company similar to. So if it's an Amazon Lab 126 and we know about them, I like to go to LinkedIn and see what job titles people have that are already in that group, and as well as go to their website and see what jobs are posted. It gives you a sense of, consulting is another route. I'm not saying everybody should go into consulting, but if you do want to get kind of a broad base, there are some innovation groups within consulting. And I think a search for any job is going to be easier when you have some sort of way to narrow it down, so industry or geography. And then the job titles also are going to differ by the job function that you have. So let's say you are an engineer and you have a certain specialty and you want to bring that forward. So electrical engineer with Lab 126. Okay. So you're bringing electrical engineering forward, or you have a finance background and maybe you're interested more on the, call it the corporate venture capital side. You might see job titles with that, that type of specialty, corporate venture capital. You might be interested in project management and have a background in that, or you might be interested in any other role. So that's another way to slice it. Is that helpful? I thought I saw a second hand. Where is it? There it is.
I wonder if you get more so about the hustler. I know you talked about Gary. What is it all just about selling? Maybe buying low and selling high.
I think the hustler at its core, as you think about your DNA and what you're good at, what your strengths are, the hustler is building a team around them based on almost like a cult of personality. And they are so motivated to do and achieve, they'll do anything. They're going to work 20 hours a day. They're going to work, 100 hours a week, whatever it is. They're going to get it done. Now, eventually, then maybe their hours will scale back, but they're all in, right? The hustler is like all in to do this and make it work. So, as I said earlier, some of these aspects can overlap. It doesn't mean they're mutually exclusive, right? Just because I'm saying a hustler has these attributes doesn't mean some of those attributes don't port over to some of these other areas. Okay, number 3. Yes.
It's kind of high level, but I'm curious, like, when you realized that the different groups, like when it started to become clear to you, there are 8 different groups in the cell and they're categorizing. Like, what prompted you to do that?
Well, I first started doing this presentation, I don't know, Allison, about 3 years ago, maybe. And I found a Steve Blank article on the 4 types of entrepreneurs. And I was like, come on, Steve, 4, really? And so I started to do some of my own research, and that's where I came up with the 8. I will say, fun fact, if you go to the Founders Institute website, I don't know, has anybody ever been on that website? They have a Founders DNA, Entrepreneurship DNA test, which I'm going to take because I'm really curious to see what questions they ask. And their website shows maybe, I don't know, 9 categories. And I was looking at them and I'm like, okay, they mostly overlap. I'm not going to, worry about it too much for today. I was looking at it, I think, within the last 48 hours. And they had other archetypes on there. And you might look at that and say, oh, yeah, that resonates with me. And then you tell me and I'll update my deck for next year. But yeah, there's no that's what I was saying in the beginning. I think for the who you are and what makes you you becomes your DNA, and maybe make yourself a new category if it doesn't map exactly to one of these. And that's okay too.
Thanks.
You're welcome. We have a hand raise online, Jordan.
Yes. Hi. Could you talk more about founder market fit, and maybe if you have potential founder market fit, how you can improve it?
The question is how to improve your founder market fit?
Yes.
Oh, yeah. Okay. Let's think about storytelling. You're talking to your mom or your dad. Like for me, if you're me, and I had to explain what e-commerce was to my mom in the early 2000s, I had to really go basic, right? And then over time, as I told that story over and over about why I was interested in doing what I was doing, because the field of digital marketing didn't even really exist back then, and why we were selling clothes online and what that meant. And because of other things in my experience, I was tying it together for her. Oh, okay. She was starting to get it. Well, multiply that now times, a bigger number and saying, an investor or a recruit, someone you're trying to recruit, a business partner is going to believe in this with you. That story. What is your story, right? What is the story that connects you to the problem that you're solving and the mission that you're creating? That story can be the missing link. It can be very, very powerful. I won't throw out any names or anything, but I remember last spring, I was here for the McGinnis competition, and we saw some really amazing teams that day. And one of the presenters, one of the entrepreneurs, she did a pretty okay job with the presentation, but not fantastic. And to her credit, she wanted some feedback. So I told her, I said, I wasn't connecting the dots from your personal experience to what you were talking about as an opportunity. It just wasn't there for me. And I don't want to throw her under the bus. She's not in the room, but it just didn't click. But the thing about it that I told her is that her background and her personal stories were so amazing. And I happen to know that because another adjunct told me about her and her amazing experiences prior to coming to Carnegie Mellon as a freshman. And I was expecting to hear about that in her pitch, and it was nowhere to be found. And it just didn't connect for me. So that's just one example. I'm sure there are many. But what's the story? What's the narrative? Why are you doing what you're doing? Who are you doing it for? And why do you care? And why should others care too? If that's not sharp, then that's where I'd start. And that could be your first domino, right? Start small. Think about your why. Simon Sinek, good book. Start with why. Who's next? Any other questions? Yes.
Okay, is there a way that you can take multiple types of entrepreneurship and create a new one? Like say if someone wanted to do they want to be an innovator, but also at the same time they want to be a hustler.
Sure.
Either hustling may require they look into other business ventures and then put them together.
Yeah. Pull from this what you need to. You're the entrepreneur here. This works for me. That works for me. I'm going to mash it up and I'm going to make that me. That's your entrepreneurial DNA. Absolutely. 100%. There's a chat. Do you want to read that out loud? Oh, you're welcome. Yes. You know what? I am currently in the first category of a small business as a mergers and acquisitions advisor, business transition advisor to business owners. I aspire to grow that, but do I think it's a scalable startup? Probably not, but I could be wrong. I don't know. I'm going to challenge myself on that. The other thing I think about is if I put myself back 20 years, I probably would have bought a business. So I think I am an acquisition entrepreneur because of my risk profile. I think that's if I wasn't creating my business as a I'm a service provider, right? If I wasn't doing that, I would probably buy a business. But that's me, and I'm honest about my risk profile. I think that's one of the reasons why I didn't pursue, the garage nature in 1999. Plus, the market was kind of wonky back then. Yes.
One on my question. What's the most common entrepreneurial path for a scientist?
Oh, what is the most common entrepreneurial path for a scientist? I don't know if I know the answer to that. I would say a scientist by trade is a craftsperson, mostly. These are just like a doctor or a lawyer. You are learning a craft. And what's important to them and that archetype of a craftsperson is the success of the craft. So many scientists go into research for that reason, right? They are seeking an answer to something, whether it's inventing the COVID vaccine or, you know what I mean? So from a career standpoint, does that mean they can't go into their own business? No, of course they can. It's just probably most common that they're going to seek the path of answers via research, maybe in a large company or through their own, like, let's say it's biotech. And here in Pittsburgh, we have a very thriving biotech community. And there are many researchers who, I don't know about the founder researcher ratio. I don't know about that data, but researchers who are part of the founding team, maybe as a CTO or et cetera, where they are looking to find a scalable business model for this particular application of, in the case of, whether it's a drug or whatever it is. Anything else? I love the questions, you guys. Thank you so much. This is really fun. Yeah.
How did you get into the M&A business and what attracted you to start your own?
I got into the M&A business when the company I was with was acquired by FedEx Corporation. And going through that as an executive was very exciting, but very difficult. And I appreciated that this 125-year-old company, third generation company, was no longer part of that family anymore. And at the day of the closing, the family was out completely. So myself and the other executives rolled into FedEx. I became an officer of FedEx. It was very exciting. I went through the integration process and then found myself on the other side of the integration where my group got consolidated. And that happens, that happens. And as I thought back to my experience, some things were jumping out at me. What was resonating was innovation, growth, and transition. And those three things became the pillar of what I do today. And so I chose the path of M&A, got my certification. Just to be clear, the M&A firm I'm affiliated with, but it's not my M&A firm, just to be clear. But my firm is a business advisory firm, pre-transaction. And those two things definitely intersect. So that's what got me started in thinking about being a business transition Sherpa. And I call it that for a reason. It's a movement. It's not just a point in time. One of my clients said to me, Laurie, exiting my business has been harder than building it. So those of you on the front end of building, hey, look what you have to look forward to. But there's a great book and podcast called Built to Sell. If you haven't started listening to it, I highly recommend it because these are stories from entrepreneurs who have been through this. They're talking about their exit. And many of them are going to talk about the 10-year overnight success. It just is a pattern that you'll see. So my message to you today is, start small, start with that one domino, be clear on your intention and your why. Think about the kind of entrepreneur you want to be. Think about your DNA, maybe take that assessment from the Founders Institute and find that founder's fit. Because the sooner you can find that fit, I think the more joy you'll have and hopefully the more success you'll have. So yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, just going back to the, founder market fit, and like, so I wanted to know how close, you know, in all practicality, you think your personal experience has to be with the problem. Like, let's say one of my friends mentioned to me a problem that I think is pretty compelling, but it's in an industry that frankly don't know much about, haven't had a pre-existing passion for. Is that like even a pursuit that's worthwhile, and to go try to learn more about that industry and develop that kind of like passion or personal connection to the problem? What would you advise there?
Well, let's say you were going to go raise money tomorrow. So they would say, well, what's your experience with it? And you'd say, not much. Or if you put yourself in a position to gain more experience with that problem or gain more experience with that industry, I think time is on your side with that, right? And so then when the investor says, oh, well, how much time have you been involved with this? Or tell me about that. And you have that story to tell. So if it's a secondhand story or a third-hand story, the lens I would put on that is, probably not, right? Would it pass that test of those 4 questions? Probably not. But if you immerse yourself in it, put yourself in it for a while, think Airbnb guys, right? Where they were just putting themselves in that situation to test it out literally and find out what they could solve with it. So the problem may be real and valid. The question for you would be, how can you put yourself in that situation to gain credibility with it? And that might be your first domino. One more thought on that. It could influence your partnerships. Let's say if you wanted to have a co-founder, but then make sure that the co-founder stories align.
That the co-founder has experience in that,
Yeah.
that
Yes.
And for your business, do you have to exit? Like, do you always have to exit your business? You can't just decide to stay with it.
Well, here's what I say to that. Okay, so this is a little tongue in cheek. You guys are young, so you'll look at me funny probably, but here's it. 100% of business owners are going to leave their company one day. Right? Okay. So knowing that, but you guys have a lot of time on your side. So I like to say people are going to either leave horizontally or vertically. I'm working with a lot of people that are in their 60s. Okay. So take that into consideration. But nonetheless, let's say you're a venture-backed startup. Venture-backed startups, if you're taking VC money, 100% they're thinking about their exit when they're investing in you. And they want to hear your thoughts on what an exit strategy is. So venture-backed companies are very much on this podcast, Built to Sell. It's a great show by John Warlow. And they'll talk about that. Now, they're not always venture-backed, but they are more scalable startup type companies, generally speaking. You can learn a lot from these war stories of what went well and what didn't go well. And you'll hear, oh, well, I decided to sell because. One reason is a little bluebird came a knocking. We weren't looking to sell, but here's the other thing, as I would say generally to any entrepreneur, the more well-run company you have could be literally bought in at any time. And that's better for your business and it's better for your options. So I'm answering your question, not answering your question, because the intention is if we're going to create a company or buy a company, we want to have healthy financials. We want to have, if we can, recurring revenue. We want to have growth potential. We want to have high customer satisfaction, high retention rates, low customer acquisition costs. We want to have a business that can thrive without us. We don't want an owner-dependent business. We don't want a hub and spoke problem where the companies can only thrive when the question and answer is going back and forth to the owner. We don't want the owner to be the only person who can provide that product, service, or run the sales team. All those value drivers I just mentioned in 2 seconds, those are all things I look at when I do valuations. Now, companies that are looking to get valued on revenue better have a pretty good story about the recurring revenue, right? All the other types of businesses, mostly, especially in the lower middle market and that small business category, are going to be measured on profit. So again, I'm not really answering your question, but I kind of am. So what does it mean to be ready? What does it mean for you personally? What does it mean for the business? What does it mean for financial, personal, and business? Those 3 things. I could come back for another lecture on this. This is what I talk about all the time. But yeah, I mean, the when are you ready? Is the business ready? Are you ready? And then financially, does it make sense? Constitutes the answer, which is a non-answer answer, if you follow me. It's a very, it depends answer. Yeah.
Do you have any recommendations for learning more about social entrepreneurship at Monroe City?
Oh, okay. I don't know that I'm the best person to answer that. The question is, how do we learn more about social entrepreneurship at CMU? I know there's a resource. I just don't know it at the top of my mind. Maybe that could be a follow-up if you are able to research that for the, I don't know who asked the question. One of my dear friends went here as an undergrad, and she was in, oh gosh, might have been the Heinz School. So the Heinz School may have some programs that are encouraging social entrepreneurship. That could be a place to look. And other than that, I'm sorry, I'm drawing a blank. I don't know. How are we doing on time? Oh, well, I can tap dance, or we can call it a day. Any other questions? You can also catch me on the side here after we hang up the Zoom call. Well, thank you so much for your participation. You guys were amazing. Thanks so much for coming. Thanks for the online chats and questions. And if you want to reach out, please do. And I'll also hang around for a few minutes. Enjoy the rest of your day.